Hello again, everyone. This is Steve Callis in our continuing efforts to interview all of the Powell Memorial Academy Hall of Famers. We have a very special guest today. Joe Crowley was a member of the first Powell Memorial Hall of Fame class, which is a pretty big deal given who those guys are, including Joe Crowley. But we're just going to jump right into it, Joe. I'm glad you're here, but we'll start with the very basics. Where did you grow up, and how did you wind up at Powell Memorial Academy?
Well, Steve, thank you. It's great to be with all my brothers from Power and the extended Powell Memorial family. When I went to Power, I didn't just go to Power. My brother, my sisters, my mother and father went to Power as well. So that was the kind of the atmosphere. But Steve, I grew up in Woodside, Queens. My dad was a New York City detective. Had gone to law school at night at St. John's Law School. My mom primarily was a stay-at-home mom. She, prior to that, was a legal secretary. She'd gone to Stella Morris. My dad had gone to Holy Trinity in Brooklyn. And I went to St. Mary Winfield Grammar School. It was Blessed Virgin Mary Helpful Christians, but we called it St. Mary Winfield. And a very tight-knit community, neighborhood. I'm as close to my boyhood friends today as I was growing up with them. So we stay in touch. But traditionally, Woodside had a very strong Irish flair and flavor. Grew up in a very Irish Catholic family. What brought me to Power was a couple of things, really. My dad's high school, Holy Trinity, had closed in Brooklyn. And I guess we're a little bit of a traditional family in some respects. My Uncle Father John Crowley, was a class of 49 at Powell Memorial. He passed away a few years ago. And all my uncles and aunts were very big influences on me growing up, I think, and continue to be throughout my life. One other incident was that I met Brother Jensen in a basketball game in Queens. I was introduced to him. I was a late bloomer in basketball. My first organized basketball team I played on was in the 8th grade, just before going to Power. So it was new to me, but met him at a basketball tournament and was very impressed by him. He was just someone who was just impressive, to say the least. A number of other my buddies from grammar school attended Power the same year I did as well. So that was also a motivator.
So you wind up at Power. Give us a little, history of Powell Memorial. I know you were in the band and the orchestra for 4 years. You played varsity basketball, and you were the captain your senior year. You're also president of the class, I guess, and that's like a wide variety of things. I don't know if that started your political career or not, but just give me your sense of Powell Memorial and how much it affected you and who the teachers were who affected you.
I mean, ate, slept, and drank Powell Memorial every day for 4 years and beyond. Quite frankly, it's still a big part of who I am in terms of molding me. I can remember going to Power. My first day was with my dad. I was still I guess I was in the 8th grade. I think I had to go for a test of some kind. I'm not really sure. And, a placement test, I think is what it was. I had to go for. And we took the subway took the 7 line into 42nd Street. We got off at 42nd, then took the number 1 uptown to Columbus Circle. I remember walking out. It was really, had not spent a great deal of time in the city, although born and raised in Queens. Going to Manhattan was like that was a field trip, and so my dad took me in, and that time, Power in 1975, 1976, it was still not a great neighborhood to be in outside of Lincoln Center, and the bustle of Central Park South and Columbus Circle. It was quite an education, just the subway ride to and from Power every day. But I've been walking down the street with my dad, going past Fordham University Law School, turning that corner. It was really impressionable to me. It was just, it really was just opening my eyes to so much as a 13-year-old, or I guess it was 13 or 14 at the time. One of my earliest memories of power was my freshman year. I was in room 706. We were at the very top of the school, just below the brothers' quarters. We were
Right.
had 7 flights of stairs every day. I used to remember. I used to be able to remember my locker number, my lock code. I can't remember anymore. But my first class was Latin, and I'd never taken a foreign language before. And unbeknownst to me, who was going to be teaching the class was Brother Jensen. And I remember my first day in class. He walked in, and you have to remember, Steve, I went to a co-ed Catholic high school taught by Dominican nuns and
Wow.
by women.
Right.
And here I'm going to a school where there are very few women in the school, and most of the teachers were brothers. And in walks this man who had the thickest, widest shoulders I'd ever seen, looked like a football player, and walked in with a short sleeve black shirt with the brother collar on. And he's African American, he's black, and he's an Irish Christian brother, But I had met Brother Jensen, I said earlier, in my 8th grade, was very impressed by him. He walked in as well with a briefcase, a black briefcase. And he walked up to the board. And I guess those first couple of days, you had to sit in an assigned seat so they can get to know your name and everything.
Right.
And he starts to write, I don't know, something, usi, uamo, miso, si, so something on the board, And in my first day in class, lo and behold, I don't have a pen or a pencil. So I don't know anybody in the class. None of us knew each other,
Right.
And he asked the guy left of me, you got a pen or a pencil? No. You got to write, you got a pen or pencil, tap the guy on the shoulder. Nobody has any pen or pencil on me. Brother Jensen catches me on the side of his eye, and he looks at me and he says, Mr. Crowley, why is it you haven't taken that which I have placed on the board and partaken that and placed it in your notebook? And I said, brother, I don't have a pen or a pencil. He goes, Mr. Crowley, you'll take yourself and your accoutrements and you will leave the room. Now, Steve, mind you, I did not know what accoutrements meant, but I did know he wanted me to take all my things and leave the room. That's what I knew. At least I assumed that much. And I was a pretty, I never got in trouble. I was in school, so it was pretty law-abiding. And we get outside. I'm outside the hallway there, and I'm out there for about 45 minutes to an hour, hoping no one comes by to yell at me. And Brother Jensen comes out after class is over, and he takes his index finger, he points it on my chest, he says, Mr. Crowley, you will never, ever, 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 ever again forget your accoutrements when you come into my class. Is that clear? I said, it is, yes, brother. Huge welt on my chest. No one could see. So he said, and I'll see you later at basketball tryouts. So he was a really good guy, and someone who I really grew to love and respect. And sorry to hear that he had gotten sick and then he passed away. But he left. He was one of the people who impressed me and had a great influence on me. The other teacher that I got to know a bit later was Mr. Bellino, who was the leader of the band after Mr. Mora had retired. And Mr. Bellino, Tom Bellino, was a great influence on me musically in terms of, I just thought the world of him. I thought he was a great musician and incredibly brilliant and smart to be able to compose and do all the things he did. But he also made a great impression on me. I still have fond memories of Mr. Bellino. So, yeah.
And is it true that you played at Alice Tully Hall when you were in the Power Orchestra?
We did, yeah. Oh, yeah. Every year, it was either Carnegie Hall or for me, it was. I guess the Carnegie Hall days were over. Every year we played at Alice Tully Hall in Lincoln Center, and one year we had a very special year. It was the 2000 show of the Ed Griffin Show, and Merv Griffin. Merv Griffin. And the Power Band was asked to play at the at that show, and I remember this day. It's and I'll never forget that. And we marched down the theater on live or on television. I know it was taped or live, but I believe Willie Stargell was there. And one of the guys from Starsky and Hutch was there, the blonde guy from Starsky and Hutch. And I can't remember who the other guests were, but it was Merv Griffith's 2000 show. And there came the Powell Memorial Marching Band. You have to remember, I don't think there were any other marching bands in Manhattan. And we would, so there was slim pickings, I guess, so there, but we ended up, we would march all around the school and all around the city. It had to be something for people to watch. And, in the concrete canyons, and you have, these drums blasting off and trumpets blaring, throughout the streets or marching around. And it was intense because, you look at a marching band and you think it's not that big a deal, right? But you had to be in shape to be able to play and march and do all this at the same time and do all the routines. It was a lot of fun, a lot of work, but I enjoyed every year of it. And I think, I said I was a late bloomer to basketball and the sports, really, so, I think I started to really get it in my junior, maybe my senior year in high school in terms of sports. But music is something that came to me very, very easily and very, I had a bit of a talent for it and a knack and an ear for it. And after leaving Power, I had prior to leaving Power, I had another uncle was a priest, and he taught me how to play a couple of chords on the guitar, and fell in love with the Beatles, and got into college, and it was all Bruce Springsteen, John Mellencamp, and the Stones, and got myself into a rock and roll band. I was gonna make it big time. A couple of Irish bands, played an Irish traditional music band, and got into a funk fusion band called Coast to Coast. It was all original material, predominantly black band. And here's this big 6'5" white Irish kid from Woodside, Queens, playing rhythm guitar and singing background vocals. We made a couple of records. I had a blast, learned a lot about recording. But that was an extension of my experience at Power, I think, too, in terms of my exposure to different musics I probably wouldn't have heard in Woodside, Queens, maybe in Malloy or Clancy High School. But, you go to Power and you're exposed to so much more culturally, I think, that it was second nature. But yeah, I always got a kick out of my dad. He was a New York City detective, and I think he was retired at the time, but like he really gave me a lot of free reign to, to explore that side of me as well. And every week I'd be in the studio twice a week, doing that, going to school at the same time, and just learning what I wanted to do in life, I guess, And I guess my last recollection of playing in that band was in 1984. I remember opening up one of my father's cars I was driving and putting my amplifier and my guitar into the back trunk on top of posters of my uncle, who was running for Congress that year in 1984 when Geraldine Ferraro ran for vice president of the United States. We were in her district. And that really was the real big start of my political career. I guess, Steve, you can say it did start at Power when I ran for class president in my senior year. Rod Mullen, who was a year ahead of me, was the president the year before. And God rest his soul. Rod was a good guy. He was a great athlete and a real great super leader as well. And people were drawn to him. He was magnetic, I think. And I think a lot of his classmates of 1979, my observations were that they were drawn to him. I kind of wish I was in that class sometimes, either in that class or the year after when his brother Chris was there, and Mario Ellie and all those Tommy Dawkinson and I came in together in class of 80. But there were a lot of great guys that I was exposed to around at the time, and Jerry Erasme, and just so many people that Pat Dunleavy was in my year, and Pat and I have remained friends ever since. I remember Bob Diffley, who I was in band with, and my good buddy, we were like Mutt and Jeff, Kevin Fitzgerald from Bay Ridge in Brooklyn. He came all the way. He passed away a couple of years ago. He played the clarinet. I played the trumpet. He was blonde haired, about 5'6" or 7, and here I am, 6'5". When I had more hair, and we would just kick it around and had a great experience together. Kind of growing up. It was really just something special. But that was Power. It was a mix of people from all over, and Puerto Rican kids, Black kids, Italian kids, obviously Irish kids, Asian kids. It was just, it was just a hodgepodge of just so many different cultures and backgrounds. It was wonderful.
Yep. So tell us now at Queens College, what did you
Yeah.
study? How did you expand into your political life? What was the effects of that?
Yeah.
Wow.
I initially started studying. I really wanted to be a musician, and I met with the head of the music department, my uncle Walter Crowley, who had ran for Congress and then later became a city councilman. He was on the board of higher education at the time, and really pushed me to go to Queens College. It was, believe it or not, Steve, it was $1,400 a year, $700 a semester. I look back on it now and had one of the greatest educations. I, I think about it now. I must have been on scholarship. It was so cheap, But I was a good student. I was a B plus student, at Power. I didn't. The one thing, if I ever could go back and for my future generations who are watching this today and you're younger, study hard. My father used to say, work, study, get ahead. And I think if I would have applied myself a bit more. But it was different in those days, I think. There wasn't the pressure I think that, young people have today to perform. It's not only, where you go, not on how well you do at school, where you go to school matters, like the people,
Yeah.
And it just puts, I see my own kids or others around the pressures are very, very high and hard. That wasn't like that for us. And I didn't feel that pressure. Maybe I had more to do with my family around me. I just didn't feel that pressure. But I initially wanted to be a musician. And I remember, you can't forget the name. I met with the head of the department. My uncle had arranged it. I think he arranged it to discourage me from becoming a music major. And his name was Leif Erikson, right? You're not going to forget that name, Leif Erikson. And I meet with him, and he asked a few questions, and he said, "Yeah, Joe, I don't think music's going to, you want to be a music as your major, And he really did dissuade me from doing it. And I look back and I appreciate it. When you think like Queens College produced a number of great musicians, including Marvin Hamlish
Wow.
and Paul Simon. And Paul Simon was not a music major. He was an English major at Queens College. So, but I did avail myself of opportunities to take some music classes and took a couple piano classes when I was there as well. But you didn't have to declare your major until I guess your sophomore year or so. And I declared for political science and communications. I did a dual major in both political science and communications. Not really still knowing what I was going to do. I had a heavy concentration in history, and particularly Irish history and American history. And, graduated with a degree in both. And again, met some of my lifelong friends at Queens College that I continue to have. But it was a bit of a shock coming from a school like Power, where you don't really, as much as we were exposed to the world in many unique and different ways, it was still fairly insular. And you get to a school of 15,000 people, and all of a sudden you realize how small you really are. Where for instance, I ran for president of student body class in my senior year and won. When I ran for student body president in Queens College, which I did, I came in third miserably, but we treated it like a real campaign with posters. We put, I'm not saying anyone should do this, but I'm not saying I did it, but I'm told that some people put posters up in the middle of the Long Island Expressway, 1 mile each way, going to and from Queens College. It said, "Put Crowley and Fox in the ballot box." And Kathleen Fox, who was a dear friend, she was running as vice president. So it was "Put Crowley and Fox in the ballot box." How those posters got up in the middle of the LIE, in the middle of the night, I think it was about 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning. I think I was told they used broomsticks that pushed them up higher so they would be more difficult to get down. How they got there, I have not a clue. But they, to no avail, helped me at all. They didn't help me much at all. It was a great experience. It was my first of a couple of losses, but loss is an important part of life, and it teaches you. And winning is nice, but loss is also an important aspect to that. So that was the first loss. It wasn't as maybe I won't say devastating, but it wasn't as life changing maybe as other future losses were. But I had a heck of a lot more wins than losses, so that was important. If we're going to, I use the analogy in basketball, for a season. And I spent 32 years in elective office. So I was, in the end, I was 16-1 when it came to elective office. So that wasn't a bad season.
That's pretty good. So you get out of Queens College, you've had some taste of political stuff, I guess. Did you
Yeah,
go right into politics, or did you do something in between
yeah.
running?
I was pretty fixed on applying to law school, and I was 23 at the time, and working in my father's firm, and doing court appearances for them when they couldn't make it, and or just doing some legwork for them. Serve some papers from time to time as well, which was a good experience to learn about. And then what happened was, after my uncle lost to Tom Manton, who became the congressman, was a former city councilman, and someone who I really didn't have much affinity or affection for because he defeated my uncle in that primary, went on to become the congressman to replace Geraldine Ferraro. But my uncle became a city councilman after that, replaced Manton in his seat, and then died a couple of years later. And I'm now 23, and I guess I was the oldest of, I have a very large family. We were the smallest family. Only 4 in my family. My Uncle Walter had 15 children, and
Wow.
other families 11 and 8. We were the small Irish Catholic family, and the joke is we had TVs, but no, just kidding. That was funny. That's not for my kids to hear, by the way. Really, I guess I was the one who was interested. It was the right place at the right time. My dad had no interest in running for office, really. 6 months after my uncle died, my local state assemblyman died, and that fellow Tom Manton, who was the congressman, I saw him at the Cork County dance in Queens County, and some guys are at the table and said, "Hey, Joe, that Tom Manton, he's coming over to talk to you. I think he's coming over to the table." And I was like, "He's behind me now?" I was like, it was really, I wasn't, it was a kid in me. I couldn't accept him having had defeated my uncle. And I turn around, he taps me on the shoulder. He goes, "Joe Crowley, how would you like to be the next assemblyman for the 30th Assembly District?" I said, "You talking to me? You talking to me?" And I said, well, Congressman, I'll have to talk to my father. I did, went home. And the next was history. Rest was history. I found myself in a 7-way primary. I had the most well-known, one of the more well-known names to my uncle, and won that long primary, and won the general election to the state assembly back in 1986, and served in the state legislature for 12 years. I chaired the Racing and Wagering Committee for 6 of my last years there. And then in 1998, that guy, Tom Manton, who I had loathed at one time, he became my mentor and my very dear friend. And I ran to replace him in 1998 when he retired, and then served for 10 terms, 20 years in the House of Representatives. As I said, for 32 years I was in elective office.
So tell me about being a congressman for 20 years, especially an Irish kid from Woodside and Power. I mean, that's pretty incredible in the overall scheme of things. But I assume you were in a lot of important legislation over the years. If you had to give us a few highlights about, bills or laws you got passed or things you were involved in, just give us like your greatest memories, if you will.
I get that, Steve. I get asked that question so many times, but to have, played a part in history in many respects, in a front row seat, it's difficult. It's a hard question to answer, and people say, "How is that hard to answer?" Can't you remember? I had so many events that were life changing to me. But I served for 20 years. I first started out on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and later served on the House Ways and Means Committee for 12 years, and I was successful in running for House leadership. I first was the vice chair of the Democratic Caucus, and in my final term, I was the chair of the Democratic Caucus, which was at the time the 4th highest position in the Democratic Caucus leadership. Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, Jim Clyburn, then myself.
Wow.
I would say, my first introduction in terms of foreign affairs really happened in the state legislature. My mom, having been born in Northern Ireland in County Armagh, I had a real affinity or attraction to what was happening in Ireland at the time. That was, well before the peace process. The troubles were still ongoing in the north, and so I was very much involved in those issues as an Irish American, in a position to have an opinion that maybe others would care about. Passed legislation, worked on the McBride principles in the state assembly to force the British and both sides to the table to allow for more opportunities for work for Catholics, primarily in the north of Ireland. And then I passed a controversial piece of legislation which required the teaching of the Great Famine of the Hunger in New York State's curriculum, both public and private schools. And to this day, a question is asked every year in the History Regents exam on the effects of the famine on New York State and what it did. But that was controversial. That was prior to the days of the internet. So the only death threats I got were via the mail from folks in England and Northern Ireland. But I do believe that was during the time of the 150th anniversary of the commemoration of the hunger. And not too long after that, Tony Blair came just short of apologizing for what the British had done to the Irish during that time. And I do think it had an effect on the process, because you cannot have peace and move forward until certain things are acknowledged about the past. And so I do think that had an effect on that overall in terms of movement. I later was, when I was in the House of Representatives, on a trip to Ireland, Northern Ireland, and to England, to Great Britain. I had the opportunity to go to 10 Downing Street when Blair was about to leave office. And we sat in the treaty room, myself and Richie Neal and a few other members from the Friends of Ireland Committee. And sitting across from Tony Blair, I was one of the more junior members, just have a couple of questions. The chair and the vice chair would speak. And I just couldn't help myself. Richie said, "Would you mind if I just ask one quick question?" He goes, "Yeah, sure, Joe, go ahead." I said, "Mr. Prime Minister, I want you to know, when history is written about you, and there will be history written about you, you are going to go down as the greatest English Prime Minister the Irish people ever had." I paused, and everyone was kind of taken aback. And he said, "Well, Joe, I'm part Irish. My mother's people are from Donegal. And in this very room, at this very table, is where Winston Churchill, my predecessor, negotiated the peace treaty of 1921 with Michael Collins." And I was just blown away. I said, this can't be happening, but it was. It was true. It was real. And so that was certainly, that my involvement in the peace process in the north of Ireland was something what was very near and dear to me, and continued to work on throughout my career. I think legislatively, the Affordable Care Act was something that I was very, very much engaged in, both in terms of securing the votes for the passage, but playing a very intimate role in terms of the negotiation, even within the Democratic caucus. This wasn't just Democrats and Republicans. There was great divisions within our own caucus in terms of how we should move forward on many of those things. I had the opportunity to fly to India on Air Force One with President Obama, with Speaker Pelosi et al. It was a great, I chaired the India caucus for half a decade. Being in the Oval Office, a couple of days after 9/11, after I lost my first cousin, John Moran, who was a battalion chief of the fire department, talking about the recovery, that what would be needed, the $20 billion that Senator Schumer at the time proposed, and President Bush agreed to. I will tell you, of all the presidents that I served with, and from Clinton to, I met more, but from Clinton to Bush, to Obama, to Trump, that George Bush was probably the most amiable fellow in that position. I got to know him very well, and not well enough as a Republican president, as a Democratic member of Congress, but was invited to a number great dinners at the White House on the second floor. And I remember one time, my wife Casey, my wife is from Montana, and originally her family's is still back there. They're a cattle ranching family, and Casey was a baptized Methodist, a confirmed Lutheran, then she became Catholic. We have 3 kids, and we were invited to the White House for the papal nuncio was going to be at the White House. And where the Bushes did it, they would have about 5 or 6 tables in the room, and I was the only congressman that was invited to it, which was kind of interesting. And they probably wanted something. I didn't know what they wanted yet, but they wanted something. And what they did is they would separate you from your spouse. So I sat at Mrs. Bush's table, and Casey sat between the president and the papal nuncio.
Wow.
Now, I'd have a hard time knowing what the papal nuncio does, basically, but Casey had not a clue. And at the end of the dinner, the president signed his menu that they had, and everyone had a menu in front of them. And they go around the table, and everyone signs everyone else's menu card. And the president says, "This will be in my library when I retire in Texas." And it has all these great signatures on it, et cetera. And everyone got to take one home with them. And Casey came up to me after, she goes, "Joe, what is a papal nuncio?" And I said, "Casey, basically, you were sitting next to the second and third most important person in the world. The Pope was not at the table, but the president and the papal nuncio were." I said so. I jokingly said so, but those are the kinds of experiences I think that can never be taken away, and things that I think I'll look back always fondly and reminisce about. And had many, when the Yankees won the World Series in '99, being at the White House with the Clintons and Joe Torre and
Wow.
George Steinbrenner, and you're meeting all these great players, and Paul O'Neill and Jeter and all that stuff. It was just wonderful. That was a great. And here I am, a Mets fan, but I was like a kid in the candy shop. My wife Casey's a Yankees fan. Go figure. But it was a lot of fun. We had those times as well.
I did want to ask you about one thing during your 20 years that hooks back to Power. Tell us about your friendship with, of course, Lou Alcindor, that when he was at Power, who became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And tell us also your involvement, I think, with the late, great John Lewis, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yep.
about the Presidential Medal of Freedom that Kareem eventually received.
Yeah, John also received that award, obviously, under Obama as well. John Lewis was one of the greatest civil rights leaders of our time, and up there with King, up there with Martin Luther King. And he was my colleague, and he was my friend. He's a wonderful, beautiful, beautiful person, human being. As is Kareem. Kareem is an incredible person. I met Kareem a couple of times. I met him actually accidentally. We're both going into a Tower Record up near, I think it was Tower Records up by Old Powell Memorial by Lincoln Center. He's hard to miss. And I introduced myself at the time, it was, "Oh, nice to meet you," and go about our business, But I really got to meet him a bit the night we were inducted into the Hall of Fame. And he reached out to me after that, and we struck up a relationship and a friendship. And I remember that when Hillary Clinton was running for president, I was asked to speak at the convention on her behalf, as was Kareem. And when Kareem was done with his speech, I'd already given mine. He sat with me for the rest of the time. My wife and Casey and I, we kind of protected him, I guess, to some degree from people coming up to him and begging for his autograph, et cetera, et cetera. He's very recluse in some respects. He's a wonderful human being, great heart, great smile, but he can be a little reserved, and I think highly misunderstood. He's not standoffish. I just think people have certain personality traits, but I can tell you, he's been nothing but warm to me. My brother Sean went to Power as well, and our mom passed away in February of this year. And Kareem sent the most lovely video to me, remembering my mom, and it was just nice. And Obama was going out, and I thought, didn't know who the president was going to be. And Kareem has a relationship with Clinton. So if it was Clinton, it wasn't going to be an issue. But I did think, first African American president, to be in office, to receive the Medal of Freedom from him, it would have been great. And um, I wrote a letter to the president asking him to consider Kareem for the Medal of Freedom, and they let me know that he would be, and then that he was going to get it. And because they invited me down to the White House as well when he got it, it was you talk about a momentous day. That was incredible. Robert De Niro got it the same day.
Wow.
I mean, you name it. Now, I will admit this. It was great to be there for Kareem and his family, his entire family. Got to meet all his kids and stuff as well. But Kareem was honored the same day that Bruce Springsteen was honored. So don't tell Kareem. I hope nobody tells Kareem. But I nearly lost it. That I'm speaking to Bruce Springsteen, and I'm asking him all kinds of. I even told him I was at Powell Memorial on 61st and 10th Avenue when you were recording The River down by CBS Studios. I must have been 6 or 7 blocks away. I said, and he was very kind. He's like, it was nice to meet you, Congressman. I got to meet his kids as well, but it was a blast. And but Kareem and I have obviously remained friends ever since, and we reach out to each other from time to time. I had dinner with him just a couple of years ago in DC. COVID has made it more difficult, but we have stayed in touch. And I think Lenny Elmore, another great human being, super fellow. Lenny and I stay in touch from time to time, and just really decent people. When Rod Mullen was dying, my brother Sean and I were reaching out to be helpful to him in any way we could, and we talked to Chris a couple of times as well about that. But that was one of my disappointing days of power was the day that Chris Mullen left when I was in my senior year. I really felt terrible about that, and because Chris is a good guy, a good fellow, and when you're in high school, you don't always have control over your life, and
Right.
others control your lives, So that was kind of a sad day. I didn't have many sad days of power. That was one of them. The other sad day was the day they announced they were going to close it, and I was down there protesting with all the kids in the gym. I was already in college at the time, I guess. I was just finishing up college, and remember seeing one of my future colleagues there, Jerry Nadler, who was also fighting on our behalf to keep it open. But it was the day the music died for me. It was the day Pound Memorial closed, or announced it was closing, and we couldn't keep it open. So held a grudge against Brother Delaney. I'm letting I have Irish Alzheimer's. I forget everything but the grudge. I'm forgetting that one as well. Brother Delaney's passed away, so I'm trying not to be as mean spirited, But
So your 20-year run in Congress ended in 2018. Tell us what you've been doing the last 3 years, including through COVID.
sure.
But the one thing I'd like you to focus on, I know you love Irish history. I know you love American history. I know you love music. And I also know you're involved in this play that might be coming to Broadway soon.
Sure.
You give us you played in Alice Tully Hall at Power, and now you're a producer of a play that's going to go to Broadway. I mean, that's pretty incredible. But tell us what you're doing now and what's been going on.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's been exciting. I didn't look to lose in 2018, and I don't have enough time to explain, at least from my perspective, what took place. But as many people talk about the changing nature of New York and my district in particular, I had always represented a 70% minority district throughout my career. And I think Powell Memorial actually prepared me for that more than anything else. And, my brothers at Power were, as I mentioned earlier, from all different cultures and backgrounds, and ethnicities and races. And it was something that I was very at ease with because of that. And when I lost my last primary, I actually won the African American vote, the Latino vote, and Hispanic vote, and Asian vote. I lost the white millennial vote. I lost my hometown of Woodside by 400 votes. It was pretty shocking to me. I'd spent over $2.5 million on that primary, and I was defeated by a very young, charismatic young woman named Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She did a great job. I give her credit for that. Changed the nature of politics for the city and for the country in some respect as well, in terms of her introduction to the world of politics. But I was quickly recruited I still had 6 months to go, but I was being recruited by about a dozen firms. I had many options. I had not-for-profit options. I had a number of things that I could have done. But I decided to explore work with Squire Patton Boggs, which was a public policy shop in Washington, a worldwide presence, 20 countries and 46 different offices. And
Wow.
I'm not a lawyer, but I held up. I'm heading up along with John Boehner, former speaker, the public policy shop at the firm. And I now have about a dozen clients of my own, but there are many, many clients of the firms that I give advice to. I have not begun to lobby at this point, although that may happen sooner rather than later. But it's been a great experience. It keeps me, in many respects, how I lived my life. I remember Congress, many, many multiple issues all the time. It's never one thing you're working on. It's a hodgepodge of different issues. And that continues to be the case. Meeting some great people, earning a lot more money, which I'm happy about as well.
Good.
And my wife is very happy. Although I will say our oldest son is a third-year midshipman in the Naval Academy. So he saved us, our son Cullen, he saved us a good bit on tuition. But our daughter is a sophomore, just finishing up a sophomore year at Notre Dame. And that ain't cheap. And
Yeah.
we have a son in high school, which is coursing almost as Notre Dame as for high school. So I welcome the extra resources. But one of the things I am working on, I'm really pleased about, is combining my love of Irish history, of history of New York, and history of America, is a play about the 5 Points in Lower Manhattan during the Civil War in 1863, where a community within the 5 Points, the Irish community and the free Black community, were actually living not only side by side, but owning businesses together, intermarrying, having families,
Wow.
and which is not really widely known. I mean, people know about the draft riots of 1863, but they don't know how connected the Black and the Irish communities were at those times. I think a lot of people were shocked to know that. But tap dancers created there in the 5 Points. Irish step dancing, Africa Juba dancing was what created tap dancing. And this is a musical, and it uses a lot of the music of Stephen Foster, updated for the 21st century. My buddy Larry Curran from Black 47, the Irish punk rock band of the 70s and 90s, had the concept for the band. He brought me for the play, and he brought me to it. And it is a full-blown musical. It'll open as of right now in Chicago at the Needle and the Theater at the end of October. We'll run through December for 5 weeks, and then we'll come to Broadway in February of next year. So it's been pretty neat. Really, I've enjoyed it very much and gotten to meet many, many people. And I'll be a co-producer. I have a co-producer credit for that, and that's exciting. So, you never know what's going to happen. You never know when the door shuts. You never know what other doors will open, and whether the play is successful or not. And I think it will be. It's been a great experience to be work with to collaborate with such talented people. Is something that I didn't see coming. I see happening. So I'm very pleased with that. And so we never know where this will take us. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, this has been fantastic. Do you have any final words you want to say to whoever, your power, how it affected you, or
Yeah,
paraphrase the
no,
people who will
I
watch this?
I will just say to future generations of Crowleys and anyone else who's watching this that, as I said, when a door shuts, you don't know what's going to open. And the Sekou said for power, I didn't know what to expect when I got there, but I can tell you, and I took a chance, it was not the Powell Memorial the days of my Uncle John at the time. It was a different world, a different city. But I never had a single regret. The men that I was exposed to, the young boys and becoming men that I was exposed to at Power, and the teachers that were there. And there was always bad apples, right? But overwhelmingly nothing but a positive experience. And I run into folks who graduated from Power. When they were there, they hated it, but were so proud they graduated from it. It's like what my son says about the Naval Academy. It's the worst school to go to, but everyone loves when they love it when they graduate from it.
Right.
I never felt like Power was like the Naval Academy, but I always felt that it was it was a brotherhood, and it really was a strong bond, one that I think really set me on my path to life and prepared me for life in so many ways. So I'm grateful to the Powell Memorial experience, grateful to the brothers and to the lay teachers, but most importantly, I think I'm grateful for the men that I got to go to school with and to develop as lifelong friends. So the PMA all the way. Thank you all very much. And again, Steve, thank you for the interview, and I've really enjoyed it. So peace to you.
This has been fabulous, Joe. Our thanks to Joe Crowley. This is Steve Callis on behalf of the Powell Memorial Alumni Association. We'll see you the next time.